Hey warriors, most people spend their lives trying to look smart, talking loud, throwing opinions, seeking validation. But true intelligence isn't shown in words or facts. It's measured in control over yourself, over situations, over outcomes. If you've ever felt your mind works differently, notices what others ignore, senses shifts before anyone else, you're not just smart, you're dangerous in the best way. And in this video, I'll show you the traits that make quiet minds unstoppable. While everyone else reacts, if you have these traits, you're not just smart, you're dangerous in the best way. Now listen, most people spend their whole life trying to look intelligent. They collect facts, they memorize quotes, they talk fast, they talk loud, they throw opinions like confetti and call it confidence. But Machiavelli didn't measure intelligence that way. He measured it by control over yourself when you're provoked, control over situations when everyone else is confused, control over outcomes when the room is emotional, impulsive, and blind. Because real intelligence isn't about what you know, it's about what you can do with what you know without begging for attention, without exposing your next move, and without losing your position. Most people confuse intelligence with knowledge. Machiavelli measured it by control over yourself, over situations, and over outcomes. And here's the brutal truth. The world doesn't reward the smartest person on paper. The world rewards the person who understands people, reads power, and moves with timing. The world rewards the person who can stay calm while others panic, who can see patterns while others chase drama, who can hold their tongue while others sell their dignity for a moment of being heard. These aren't school traits, they're real-world traits that let you see patterns, read people, and move strategically while everyone else reacts. So, if you've ever felt like you're different, like your mind doesn't work like most people, like you notice things others ignore, like you can feel the shift in a room before anyone says a word, this video is for you. Because the smartest person in the room rarely announces it. They don't need to, they let others underestimate them, they let others reveal themselves, they let others make noise while they quietly collect the advantage. As we go through the 7 traits, keep score, because the quietest person often has the sharpest mind. And don't treat this like entertainment. Treat this like a mirror. Because if you recognize yourself in these traits, it means you're not built for the average path. You're built for strategy. You're built to win without begging. You're built to move like someone who understands the game. Here are the 7 traits that separate the smartest from the loudest. Before we go deeper, I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. I move with control. Let's start with the trait that scares loud people the most. Strategic silence. Because silence isn't emptiness. Silence is positioning. Most people talk to prove they belong. They fill every pause with jokes, opinions, stories, explanations, not because they have something valuable to say, but because they fear what happens when they stop talking. They fear losing attention. They fear being judged. They fear being unseen. But if you have this trait, you don't fear the pause. You understand something most people never learn. Attention is currency, and you don't spend it like a broke man at a casino. You spend it like an investor, carefully on purpose, only when the return is worth it. That's what strategic silence really is. It's not being shy, it's not being introverted, it's not being soft. It's knowing that every word you speak gives away 3 things: what you want, what you fear, what you're about to do next. So when the moment isn't right, you don't leak information. You don't expose emotion. You don't reveal your plan just to feel included. You wait. And while you wait, something powerful happens. Other people start talking for you. They explain themselves, they overshare, they justify, they defend, they try to impress, they try to win you over, they try to pull you into their frame. And if you're smart, you don't interrupt that process. Because people always reveal who they are when they feel safe enough to speak without resistance. They reveal their ego when they aren't challenged. They reveal their intentions when you don't argue back. They reveal their weakness when they feel like they're in control. Silence gives them that illusion. So you let them have it, you let them talk long enough to show their priorities. You let them speak long enough to expose their insecurity. You let them go long enough to show the gap between what they claim and what they actually value. This is how you gain advantage without aggression. Strategic silence also changes your presence. When you don't rush to respond, people start watching you, they start measuring you, they start wondering what you're thinking. You become harder to read, and that makes you harder to manipulate. Think about it. The person who talks non-stop is easy to predict. But the person who listens first, that person feels heavier, that person feels sharper, that person feels like they're seeing more than they're saying. And that's exactly what's happening, because you're not using conversations as a stage. You're using them as a scan. You're listening for the real message underneath the words. You're noticing who tries to dominate, who tries to please, who tries to provoke, and who tries to gain status. You're picking up on what they emphasize, what they avoid, and what they repeat when they think it's working. Then, only then, you speak, and when you finally do, your words land differently because you don't speak in paragraphs. You speak in decisions. You ask one clean question that forces clarity. You drop one sentence that resets the room. You make one calm statement that changes the direction. That's why strategic silence is a sign of intelligence. It turns your voice into a weapon, not a habit. And here's the part most people don't expect. This trait isn't just social, it's personal. Strategic silence means you can hold yourself back from impulse. It means you don't send the angry text, you don't snap in the moment, you don't announce your moves early, you don't argue with someone who's trying to drag you down to their level. You let time do the work, you let patience build pressure, you let people show you exactly where they stand, then you move. Now, I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. I speak with purpose. Number 2, reading real motives. This is where most people get played because they listen to sentences instead of reading purpose. The average person treats conversation like a literal transaction. You said this, so you must mean this. They assume everyone is operating with clean intentions, clear logic, and honest delivery. That sounds nice. It's also how people get used, cornered, and manipulated without even noticing. If you have this trait, you don't fall for the surface. You pay attention to what drives the words, because motives don't live inside speeches. Motives live inside behavior, especially behavior under pressure. Anyone can sound reasonable when everything is calm. Anyone can look loyal when there's nothing to lose. Anyone can appear supportive when it costs them nothing. But when there's a choice between their image and their interest, that's when the real person shows up. So you don't just ask, what did they say? You ask, what are they trying to get? And you don't need paranoia to do this. You just need awareness. You notice who only shows up when they need something. You notice who becomes friendly right before they make a request. You notice who praises you in public, but undermines you in private. You notice who always has an excuse, but never has accountability. You notice who changes their story depending on the audience. That's not negativity. That's intelligence. Because once you can read motive, you stop making emotional decisions based on someone's performance. You stop being pulled by guilt, flattery, urgency, or pressure. You stop reacting to their tone and start analyzing their aim. And here's the scary part. Most people are not even lying on purpose. They're lying to themselves first. They don't say, I want control. They say, I'm just trying to help. They don't say, I'm jealous. They say, I'm just being honest. They don't say, I want attention. They say, no one appreciates me. But your mind doesn't get hypnotized by the packaging. You look past the story and focus on the payoff. What do they gain if you believe them? What do they lose if you say no? What happens if you don't respond the way they expect? That's why this trait feels almost like a sixth sense. It's not magic. It's pattern recognition in human nature. Machiavelli once wrote, men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand. Everyone can see and few can feel. That line matters here because it exposes a hard reality. People often judge based on what looks convincing, not what's true. They get seduced by confidence, style, titles, charm, and volume. They mistake appearance for reliability. They confuse boldness with honesty. You understand that the smoothest talker in the room may be the most dangerous one, because they know how to sell a version of themselves that gets them what they want. And if you can't see their motive, you become part of their plan. So you develop a different way of listening. You listen for what's missing. You notice what they never answer directly. You notice how quickly they shift blame. You notice when they dodge specifics but keep repeating emotional lines. You notice when someone tries to rush you into a decision because speed is a classic tactic. Pressure first, clarity later. And instead of confronting every time you store the data, you let time reveal the truth, because you know that people can fake words for a long time, but they can't fake consistent behavior forever. This trait also makes you calmer in conflict. When someone gets dramatic, you don't automatically feel threatened. You ask yourself, what is this emotion trying to control? When someone gets cold, you don't beg for warmth. You ask, what are they withholding and why now? When someone acts overly generous, you don't immediately get grateful. You ask, what debt are they trying to create? That's how you protect your mind, not by being hostile, not by being cynical, but by being awake. Type this affirmation in the comments. I see intentions. Number 3, curiosity is a weapon. Some people are curious because they're bored. If you have this trait, you're curious because you're hungry, not for gossip, not for trivia, not for random information that makes you feel educated for 5 minutes. Your curiosity is targeted, it has direction, it has teeth. You don't ask questions to sound smart, you ask questions to gain clarity. And clarity is power. Most people live on the surface of life, They accept the first explanation. They take rules as permanent. They take that's just how it is, like it's a law of nature. They move through jobs, relationships, and systems without ever pausing to study what's really happening under the hood. You can't live like that. Your mind naturally wants to know the structure behind the structure. So, you investigate incentives, you study outcomes, you track cause and effect, you look for the invisible threads that control what people do. You're the type who notices that a policy isn't for safety, it's for control, that a trend isn't organic, it's engineered, that a rule exists because someone benefits from everyone following it. And once you start thinking like that, you stop being easy to manage because you see that most. Situations are not random. They're designed by habit, by culture, by money, by fear, by ambition, by ego. You start asking the questions that pull the curtain back. Who wins if this continues? Who loses if it changes? Who gets paid, praised, or protected by the current setup? What would happen if people stopped cooperating? That's curiosity as a weapon. Curiosity that exposes the real game. And the reason this is a sign of intelligence is simple. The person who understands the system can move inside it without being trapped by it. Most people try harder. You try smarter. You don't rely on effort alone. You rely on leverage. You look for the pressure points, the small changes that produce big results. You study why some people always seem to win with less struggle. You study why certain personalities rise faster. You study what creates authority even when the person doesn't deserve it. You're not obsessed with success stories. You're obsessed with mechanisms because once you understand the mechanism, you can replicate the result. This trait also shows up in your daily life. You don't take advice blindly. You want to know the logic behind the advice. You don't follow someone just because they're confident. You want to know what shaped their confidence. You don't accept a label like good or bad without asking what standard is being used and who created it. That kind of curiosity doesn't make you annoying. It makes you dangerous because it makes you hard to deceive. And here's a detail most people miss. Curiosity isn't only about learning new things. It's also about noticing the things everyone else ignores. You pay attention to small signals. You watch timing. You watch reactions. You watch patterns. You recognize that in real life, the biggest truths are rarely announced. They're hinted through repetition, through what gets rewarded, through what gets punished, through what people pretend not to care about while secretly chasing it. So, you don't just learn, you decode, and that decoding changes how you speak, too. Your questions aren't random, they're surgical. They're the type of questions that make people pause, the type that reveals contradictions, the type that forces someone to either get honest or expose themselves, because the right question can do what 100 arguments can't. It can collapse an illusion. That's why your curiosity is a weapon, not because you're trying to destroy people, but because you refuse to be controlled by lies, confusion, or weak explanations. And there's another side to this trait. You're willing to be wrong. Most people hate being wrong because it hurts their identity. You care more about accuracy than ego. If your curiosity finds a better truth, you drop the old belief without drama. That flexibility makes you sharper every year while others stay trapped in pride. So when you walk into a room, you're not just hearing words and observing faces. You're scanning structure. You're mapping incentives. You're identifying power flows. You're watching what people protect, what they fear, and what they chase. That's not overthinking. That's intelligence applied to reality. Number 4, you don't get bored easily. Most people aren't tired, they're unstimulated. So, they chase noise, they scroll, refresh, bounce between apps, jump into pointless arguments, and call it keeping busy. But it's not productivity, it's sedation. It's a way to avoid being alone with their own thoughts for more than 30 seconds. If you have this trait, you're different. You can sit with nothing happening, and you don't feel empty, you don't panic. You don't need a crowd, a screen, or chaos to feel alive. Your mind stays active without begging the world for entertainment. That ability is rare, and it's a quiet sign of high intelligence because boredom isn't a time problem, it's a depth problem. When someone gets bored fast, it often means they can't create meaning on their own. They need outside input to feel something. They need constant novelty because their mind can't hold focus long enough to build anything real. But you can stay on one thought long enough to understand it. You can stay on one skill long enough to master it. You can stay in one season long enough to grow. And that alone puts you ahead of most people. Because almost everything valuable takes time. Skill takes time. Influence takes time. Trust takes time. Real success takes time. The person who can't handle slow will never build anything that lasts. Here's the harsh truth. The world is designed to break your attention. It wants you distracted. It wants you impatient. It wants you addicted to quick hits, quick laughs, quick anger, quick pleasure, quick approval. Because a distracted person is easier to steer, but you're hard to steer. You don't need constant stimulation to feel okay, which means you're not easily controlled by it. You can step away, you can unplug, you can sit in quiet and actually think. And when you can think clearly, you can make better choices than someone who's always emotionally crowded. This trait also shows up in how you handle downtime. Most people treat free time like a leak in the day, something to fill with anything. You treat it like a training ground. You use calm moments to sharpen yourself, to prepare, to plan, to clean up the details everyone else ignores. And that connects directly to Machiavelli's mindset. Machiavelli once said, "Never in peaceful times stand idle." That line isn't about working non-stop like a machine. It's about understanding the real advantage of quiet seasons. When things are calm, that's when you build reserves. That's when you improve. That's when you develop strength without pressure. Because when pressure arrives, and it always arrives, most people start thinking for the first time. They start planning when it's already late. They start learning when they're already losing. They start building discipline only after they've already broken something important. You don't live like that. You use the calm to become dangerous. Another reason this trait signals intelligence is because it proves you can handle delayed reward. You don't need everything to feel exciting right now. You can do boring work today because you understand what it buys you tomorrow. You can repeat the same practice, the same routine, the same focus because you're building a result, not chasing a mood. That's why you often look calm on the outside, but inside your mind is working like a strategist. You're connecting dots. You're refining your next step. You're seeing where this leads. If you keep going, you're thinking beyond the moment. And because you don't need constant external entertainment, you don't get pulled into useless drama as easily. You don't chase every trend. You don't jump at every headline. You don't let every person's opinion enter your head like it owns the place. You choose what you consume. You choose what deserves your attention. That alone is power. So, if you've ever been told you're too quiet or too serious or you stay alone too much, understand this. Your ability to stay engaged without noise isn't a weakness. It's an advantage most people will never develop. Number 5, no need to prove you're smart. One of the clearest signs you're smarter than most people is also one of the least flashy. You don't feel the need to prove it because the moment you're obsessed with proving intelligence, you stop using intelligence, you start performing, and performance is expensive. It drains focus. It pulls you into pointless battles. It tempts you to talk when silence would serve you better, to argue when moving on would be stronger, to correct people when letting them remain wrong would cost you nothing. Most people can't resist that urge. They need to win every conversation. They need to be seen as right. They need the room to validate them. They need someone to say, "Oh wow, you're smart." Because without that praise, they feel invisible. But if you have this trait, you don't chase that. You understand that intelligence is not a costume you wear in public. It's a tool you use in private. So you don't turn every moment into a debate arena. You don't correct every mistake you notice. You don't break down every flawed idea just to show you can. You choose your battles like a strategist, not like someone fighting for attention. And that choice makes you dangerous because it means your energy is preserved for what actually matters. Here's what's happening inside your mind. You value outcomes more than applause. You're not trying to look smart. You're trying to win correctly. That could mean letting a loud person take the spotlight while you take the leverage. Letting someone believe they're in control while you guide the direction. Letting a conversation end without closure because closure isn't always the prize. This trait is deeply Machiavellian. In one way, you understand that ego is a trap. Ego makes people predictable. Ego makes people reactive. Ego makes people easy to bait. When someone needs to prove themselves, you can control them with one insult, one challenge, one public disagreement. They'll jump into the fight just to protect their image, then they'll make mistakes, reveal insecurity, and lose position. You don't give people that access to you. You don't respond to every provocation. You don't let every disrespect become your problem. You don't take every disagreement personally. You're able to separate your identity from the moment, and that emotional separation is a form of intelligence. Because when you aren't emotionally hooked, you can see the full map, you can notice the hidden goal behind the conflict. You can recognize when someone is trying to pull you into a trap where the real aim isn't truth, it's control. So you step back. You ask yourself, what happens if I don't respond? What happens if I let this pass? What do I gain by staying calm? What do I lose if I get dragged into this? Most people never ask those questions. They just react, they just defend, they just perform. And then they call it standing up for themselves when it's really just ego trying to survive. But you don't confuse noise with strength. You understand that the strongest person isn't the one who wins every argument. The strongest person is the one who can walk away from a fight that doesn't pay. That doesn't mean you're passive. It means you're selective. When you speak, it's because it matters. When you step in, it's because it changes the outcome. When you correct someone, it's because there's a real consequence, not because your pride can't tolerate an error in the air. And people feel that they may not be able to explain it, but they feel it. They sense you're not chasing their approval. They sense you're not trying to impress. They sense you're not desperate to be understood by everyone. And that makes your presence heavier, because desperation is light, it floats, it begs, but calm certainty that has weight. This trait also protects you from one of the biggest intelligence killers: over-explaining. People who need to prove themselves explain everything. They justify, they give long speeches, they add extra words to defend a point that didn't need defending. And in doing that, they often reveal weakness, doubt, or hidden emotion. You don't do that. You make your point clean, or you let the moment pass, because you know a strong mind doesn't need to scream for recognition. It builds quietly, it moves quietly, it wins quietly. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I don't perform. Number 6, you can make people think it was their idea. This trait is pure strategy, because its influence works without friction. Most people try to persuade by pushing, they pressure, lecture, insist, over-explain. And the moment they push, the other person pushes back. Even when the idea is good, the ego rejects it because nobody likes feeling controlled. But if you have this trait, you don't push, you shape. You understand that people rarely fight the idea itself, they fight the feeling of being handled. So instead of forcing agreement, you build ownership. You guide the other person into seeing the conclusion in a way that feels self-discovered, like it came from their own thinking, their own values, their own choice. That's why this skill is so powerful. Once someone believes it's their idea, they'll protect it like it's part of their identity. So, you don't argue, you don't try to win, you don't make it a battle, you steer the frame. You do it with questions that narrow the path without sounding controlling, questions that quietly remove the weak options and spotlight the strong one. Questions that make the other person say the words out loud, because once they say it, it becomes real to them. And the smartest part, you don't rush the moment. You let the other person move at a pace that feels safe. You give them space to connect the dots. Because when people connect dots themselves, they trust the outcome more. They stop feeling like they're obeying you and start feeling like they're leading themselves. This trait also means you're good at reading what someone needs emotionally before they can accept logic. Some people need respect before they can listen. Some need certainty before they can commit. Some need to feel in control before they can cooperate. So you don't throw the same message at everyone. You adjust the delivery without changing the core truth. You understand that persuasion isn't just facts. It's timing, tone, and the doorway you choose. That's why you often win without creating enemies. Because you don't humiliate people into agreement. You don't corner them. You don't make them admit they were wrong in front of others. You give them a way to move toward the right decision while saving face. And saving face is not kindness. Saving face is leverage. A person who feels respected is easier to align. A person who feels exposed becomes unpredictable. Machiavelli once said, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, few really know what you are." And that principle fits perfectly here, because the person you influence should feel like they're choosing freely. They should see themselves as the author of the decision. Your guidance stays invisible, not because you're being fake, but because visible control creates resistance. So, you work with human nature instead of fighting it. You understand that people don't like commands, but they love choices. They don't like being corrected, but they love being consulted. They don't like being forced, but they love feeling understood. That's why you use framing. You don't say do this. You say which option gets you the outcome you said you want. You don't say you're wrong. You say what would make this true in the real world. You don't say my way is better. You say if we try it your way first, what would success have to look like? Notice what happens. The other person stays in motion, but the motion is now guided. You're not battling their ego. You're giving their ego a seat while you quietly drive the car. And when you do this well, you don't just change decisions, you change behavior. Because people follow what they feel they chose, they commit harder, they defend the plan. They take responsibility, they stop needing constant supervision. That's real influence. Not domination, not shouting, not control through fear, control through alignment. The best influence doesn't argue, it redirects. Number 7, you don't react, you calculate. This is the trait that separates the sharp from the reckless. You don't react, you calculate, because reactions are automatic. Calculations are chosen. Most people live like open buttons. Press the right one and they explode, trigger the right insecurity and they defend, touch the right pride and they start proving. And once you can trigger someone, you can guide them because their behavior becomes predictable. If you have this trait, you're not easy to trigger. Not because you don't feel emotion. You feel it, you just don't let it drive. You treat emotion like a signal, not a steering wheel. So when someone provokes you, you don't rush to match energy. You don't mirror disrespect. You don't instantly reply with heat. You pause, you take a breath. You look at the moment like a chessboard instead of a street fight. And that pause changes everything, because the pause gives you options. Most people don't want options. They want release. They want to say the thing that feels good right now. They want to clap back. They want to win the moment, even if they lose the week, the month, or the relationship. You don't live for the moment. You live for the outcome. So, you ask yourself questions that most people never ask in real time. What is the cost of responding right now? What do I gain if I stay calm? What happens if I say nothing and let this person keep talking? What is the real goal here? Truth, control, attention, or ego? Those questions turn chaos into clarity, and clarity is power. This trait also shows up in how you handle disrespect. You don't mistake disrespect for danger. You don't mistake noise for authority. You don't treat every rude comment like an emergency. You measure the situation. Is this person a threat or just loud? Is this conflict important or just emotional? Is this about principle or just pride? Then you respond in the way that protects your position. Sometimes your response is direct, sometimes it's silence, sometimes it's humor, sometimes it's distance, sometimes it's a boundary, sometimes it's a decision to leave the situation entirely. But here's the key. Your response is never automatic. It's selected. That's why people can't easily control you, because they can't predict you. And unpredictability, when guided by discipline, is terrifying to impulsive people. They want you to react so they can label you. They want you to snap so they can justify their behavior. They want you emotional, because emotional people can be managed. You refuse, you stay calm, and that calm makes others reveal themselves. It forces them to carry their own behavior without you helping them. When you don't react, their drama doesn't land, their manipulation doesn't stick, their attempt to derail you fails. And the longer you hold that control, the more authority you gain without asking for it, because self-control signals strength. It tells people, I'm not ruled by the room. This trait also makes you more strategic in decision-making. You don't choose based on pressure. You don't commit because of urgency created by someone else. You don't rush into agreements because you fear missing out. You slow the moment down. You take time to evaluate consequences. You ask, if I do this, what happens next? If I say yes, what door opens and what door closes? If I walk away, what power do I keep? Most people don't think that far. They treat decisions like impulses. Then they act surprised when the outcome hurts. But you calculate and you calculate because you understand something simple. The price of impulsiveness is paid later. So you pay attention to timing. You understand that the same words said at different times can produce completely different results. You understand that patience isn't weakness, it's leverage. You understand that withholding a response can be stronger than any response. And when you finally act, you act clean, no hesitation, no second guessing, no emotional overflow, just clarity, just direction. That's why this trait is the final one, because it's the trait that protects all the others. Silence, perception, curiosity, solitude, humility, influence, none of those matter if you're emotionally controllable. But if you can calculate under pressure, you can keep your advantage in any environment. If you saw yourself in these traits, understand what it really means. Your intelligence isn't loud, it's precise, it doesn't beg for attention, it doesn't chase approval, and it doesn't waste energy trying to convince everyone in the room. It moves with control. Machiavelli understood something most people forget. The sharpest minds don't just think, they position, they choose timing over impulse, they choose leverage over ego, they choose observation over noise. And while everyone else is busy reacting to life, they're shaping it, because the truth is the world is full of talented people who lose, not because they're dumb, but because they're undisciplined. They speak too early, they trust too fast, they argue too much, they give away power for a temporary feeling, and then they wonder why they keep getting outplayed. But if you have these 7 traits, you're built differently. You know when to stay quiet, you know how to read intent, you know how to study the system, you know how to grow in silence, you know how to win without showing off, you know how to influence without forcing, and you know how to stay calm when the room gets hot. That's not just intelligence, that's strategic intelligence. And in a world full of reactors, the calculators always win. So here's what I want you to do right now. If this video described you, don't just watch it, use it. If you want more Machiavelli intelligence, strategy, and psychological power, subscribe. New videos like this will train your mind to see clearer, move smarter, and stay untouchable under pressure. And share this with that one person who's quiet, but always steps ahead. You know exactly who I mean. Finally, drop this affirmation in the comments if you're serious. I move with precision.